This is the Leica M11-P, and the easiest way to think about this camera, well, it's like the director's cut of the nearly 2-year-old Leica M11. If the assignment was to take this camera and tastefully nudge it into something a little bit more timeless, it would be this camera right here. Now, there's one major upgrade to this camera that we won't be seeing in a firmware update for the M11 or M11 monochrome. But before we get to that, let's talk about some of the design changes of the M11-P. Like most P models in the Leica lineup, there is no red Leica logo. Instead, you have a screw on the front, which just gives it this cleaner look. On the black one especially, it just makes for a more stealthier profile. If you look at the top of the camera, you have the Leica script here, and these are just my own words. It just makes for something that looks like a celebration of the brand. It's like an artist signing their painting. When you look at the rangefinder itself, similar to the M11 monochrome, you have a darker trim, just adding to that stealthier profile. To the back of the camera, you now have a sapphire glass on top of the LCD. And if you're asking me, this all but eliminates the need for a screen protector. It's just gonna give you much better protection, similar to what you'd see on high-end watches. The black model has an aluminum top plate as opposed to brass that you'd find in the silver edition. And this is just me, but they say that it's a scratch-resistant black paint on the black model. I think it's a different type of paint than what's used in the Leica M11 because to touch, it just feels a little bit more rougher. Not uncomfortable, just feels like it's something that might last a little bit longer and, like the name suggests, be a bit more scratch resistant. When I touch the M11, it just feels a little bit smoother than what this is. I'm pretty sure it's slightly different, but again, time will tell how this holds up. Now, that's enough about the design changes on the outside. Let's talk about what's different on the inside. Oh, and if you want to see more images from this camera or detailed images of this camera, you can check out my photo club. It's free to join, and this is where I'm posting my photo stories from around the world. And fair warning, it's for those that really love photography. But if you're into that, check out the link in the description. The Leica M11, at least in terms of marketing, popularized this idea of shipping a camera with internal storage. And this gets an upgrade from 64 gigabytes to 256 gigabytes, a noticeable jump. But let's talk about a feature that we won't be seeing in an M11 or M11 monochrome. That is the addition of a secure chipset that allows you to encrypt your digital metadata through the Content Authenticity Initiative. What the f does that even mean? Over the years, you had dozens of companies come together to address misinformation with respect to digital content. Companies like Adobe, Microsoft, Qualcomm, the Associated Press, and yes, even Leica. The idea is that can we encrypt our metadata at the point of capture and validate this afterwards? And to take it a step further, can we also track changes made to a digital image? And that's what resulted in the Content Authenticity Initiative, the CAI. Again, what does this even mean? It means that this camera, and hopefully more cameras in the future, has a secure chipset, a specific certificate and key that allows you to encrypt the metadata at the point of capture, that you can then take this file, upload it to a site, and view that exact information, and it cannot be tampered with. To take this a step further, it can also track changes made to the file itself. Turning on this feature is really easy, and you can use it when you need to use it. Turning it on does impact the continuous shooting speed a little bit, and that's because each image has this digital signature being encrypted onto it, right? I think that if you work in journalism, if you work in documentary, if you work in fine art, this is something to be excited about, where if you are a Leica M shooter, you now have a camera that can authenticate your work at the point of capture, and I believe bring more value to your work. And in a world of AI, spoofing, and pardon my French, just shady motherfuckers, this is something that I think more users would welcome than not. So those are all the features and upgrades that have been introduced with the M11P, but let's not forget, this also inherits all the great features that the Leica M11 introduced, like that full frame triple resolution sensor that allows you to shoot at 60, 36, or 18 megapixels. You also have the Maestro 3 processor that allows you to capture at up to 4.5 frames per second. There's also the ISO range, which ranges from 64 to 50,000 natively and gives you a ton of dynamic range to work with. You have the flash sync that goes up to 1/80th of a second, and there's also the nearly 3-inch rear display with 2.3 million dots that is available to you in case you want to take a break from range finding. Look, specs are great, but what does this mean for the photographer? I've made 2 lengthy videos talking about this camera in a review and talking about it after a year of use, and quite simply, it's the best photo camera that I've ever used. The small profile, modern sensor, and infamous glass, it all comes together for just remarkable images. Images that really rival all the full frame flagships on the market and even some medium format options. Add to this all the small but powerful upgrades like the new battery that lets you shoot for days at a time. It all comes together for an experience that really gets out of the way and keeps you creating. In my 1-year retrospective of the Leica M11, I said that the glass, the results, and the experience all come together to raise the ceiling for what I could do as a photographer. And now, nearly 2 years later, you have an alternative option that's quite objectively better. Maybe I'll find some time in the future to make a review of the M11P, but in the interim, let me try to qualify this camera a little bit. Who is this camera for? Who should be excited about this thing? Well, let's say you watch my review and you watch the 1 year later and you're like, yes, the Leica M11 is a camera that will bring value to the work that I'm doing. You've decided that that camera is good enough for you. Well, should you consider the Leica M11P? If you find yourself in the world of journalism, documentary, fine art, I think this is something you might want to gravitate to. Sure, there's a couple of upgrades that make this more robust, like the sapphire glass, the increased internal storage, but that secure chipset and something that is a platform that's accepted by dozens and dozens of world-renowned companies, right, that are on this mission to authenticate digital content. I think that is going to bring real value to, the creative that's out there putting in the reps. And it's something that I want to believe may even hold up in the scrutiny of a courtroom. Look, this whole thing with the Content Authenticity Initiative and the secure chipset and encrypting your files, I think of it more like insurance. You don't want to have to use it and whip it out, but you're kind of happy that it's there when you need it. Having a way to just prove that an image was created by you, that it was not altered or was altered in a certain way, that's a powerful feature to have. And to do that easily in a very public way, that's something that, again, those 3 fields of work, I can imagine them seeing a ton of value. And sure, it's only available on 1 luxury camera at the moment, but if you are an M photographer, and especially if you're looking to upgrade, I think it's something worth being excited about. There you have it. Those are my first impressions of the Leica M11P, and thank you to Leica for giving me some early hands-on time with this thing. If you want to see more images from this camera, from this sensor, of this camera, visit my Church Street Foto Club. It's free to join, and that's where I publish stories every other week, sometimes every week. And really, if you're into photography, you want to know more about my adventures in personal and professional work, you'll find it all there. As always, my name is Gadgen. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.